listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hello, what is up? And thank you for choosing to listen to my show Straight to Video. Hope you're doing great, and I am super excited to bring you this week's episode. Today's guest has written some of hard rock and pop's biggest hits of the past 40 years or so. It goes without saying his songs have been the soundtrack for me, along with thousands, if not millions, of other music fans. It gives me huge pleasure to welcome none other than Mr. Desmond Child to the podcast to chat all about his incredible career and his new autobiography, Livin on a Prayer, Big Songs Big Life. Yes, the book is titled Livin on a Prayer because Desmond co-wrote that very song with John Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora back in the 80s, but that is just one of many, and I mean many, other great songs. I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with some of the hits, but let's just run through a few. I Was Made for Loving You by Kiss, along with some of their coolest 80s songs like Heaven's on Fire and Reason to Live. Dude Looks Like a Lady from Aerosmith. I Hate Myself for Loving You by Joan Jett. Poison by Alice Cooper. How Can We Be Lovers by Michael Bolton. Livin' La Vida Loca with Ricky Martin. This list just goes on and on. Also, if you've not heard his song Love on a Rooftop, which was on his solo album Discipline in 1991 and also recorded by Cher, please check it out because that is absolute melodic gold. We chat about a bunch of these songs along with Desmond's incredible journey from Florida to New York and eventually conquering the music world with songs that are in all of our DNAs and will forever continue to be. Desmond was super fun, really funny, loved his English tea, and continually jumped in different directions with his stories, which made for one of my favourite chats, and I want to thank him for being so cool. What a legend like this is doing on my show, I will never know. This Straight to Video podcast is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo. Affinity Photo is an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for graphic design the past couple of years. You can see it being used in the podcast episode artwork each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market. So please, if you can, check them out at affinity.serif.com. Alright, the book Livin on a Prayer, Big Songs, Big Life by Desmond Child is out in just a few weeks and can be pre-ordered from desmondchild.com. Or for you UK people, I'm pretty sure you can order it through Amazon. But right now, please sit back, grab a cup of tea and enjoy my straight-to-video chat with legendary hitmaker Desmond Child.
Hey.
How's it going, sir?
Going great. Just moved into a new house in Palm Springs. So my laptop's on a bucket.
Whatever makes it work, it's all good.
And these are portraits of our family.
Oh, amazing. Who did those? Is it a local artist or somebody you know?
Yes, Juan Bastos in LA. He had done mine, which is this one here, 20 years ago. And then I surprised my husband, Curtis, and the boys, Roman and Nero, with their own portraits. So we're all the same age.
That's awesome. Is the artist somebody you've stayed in touch with all these years then?
Yes. I commissioned a very gorgeous, huge, painting of Maria Vidal, and it hangs in my office in Nashville.
So you've still got your place in Nashville that's still operating?
Oh, yeah, of course. That's our main home, yeah.
What attracted you to Palm Springs? I'm getting really nosy straight away, but...
Well, first of all, it's gay and gray. It's like 60% gay people. And, a lot of my friends have their vacation homes here. So during the season, that's when they usually come. There's a whole social life and, that my husband Curtis and I can just jump right into.
So have you got boxes everywhere, stuff you've still got to sort through?
Oh my God, yes. It's horrible. It's a nightmare. Where are you right now?
Well, I'm coming to you from near Nottingham in the UK.
Oh, I was just there getting my Viking tattoos.
What?
Yeah, dude.
Oh, super. And where was you to get those?
In Whitley Bay near Newcastle. I went in 2 different times, 3 days and then 4 days to finish. They were long days, 8-hour days. One day was 12 hours. It's my late life crisis. My husband was very much like, why are you doing this? I had gotten tattoos of my son's names, like Roman and Nero, when I was 60. So I'm getting ready to turn 70. So I decided to go hog wild all the way. because, I got very much into watching Vikings and the Last Kingdom.
Oh, I need to bring my wife in. That could be the whole podcast.
So the castle, where Uhtred de Bebbanburg came from is called Bramborough Castle. And it's the castle that he was pining over for like 4 seasons.
Wow.
And finally won back. So back in the Viking days, it was all wood and that burnt down at some point. So they rebuilt it all in stone and it's really impressive. So I spent a morning over there just crawling through the castle. And they had a Last Kingdom exhibit with the costumes and everything. It was so great.
Was that the reason you was in the UK, just doing like a Viking location scout?
No, I mean, we hadn't been back to the UK since before COVID. So we wanted to go to see ABBA Voyage and Brokeback Mountain musical. Fantastic. And I also got to see this great, very cool version of Cabaret, the musical, in the round with this incredible troupe. So, I just love theater and it's my dream to have shows, so I try to see everything. And my husband really loves Broadway and was himself a performer of musicals and an actor when I first met him. And so we have that in common.
You've got a few, you've got a couple of British musicians on your resume, one obviously being Bonnie Tyler, who plays an important part in your songwriting journey. But I was also interested to see Robbie Williams on the list with All Before I Die. What do you remember about that particular song?
Well, at that time, he was kind of the bad boy of England, And so he came to Miami Beach where I had my studio, the Gentleman's Club. And, we weren't sure he would even show up. But when we started talking, he's such a sweet person. And at that time, I haven't seen him since then. He was very troubled. And so we thought, well, let's give him an up song because everyone was predicting that he wouldn't live, to be old. So we wanted to put that message inside of him. My collaborator and I, Eric Bazillion from the Hooters, I hope I'm old before I die, right? And so that's one of the things that I think is my mission, is to help artists find their message they don't even realize they have. Because when they sing something like that, when he sang something like that, it goes into his spirit and then he survived.
It was such a great single. He'd done the cover of George Michael's Freedom, I think, first.
Oh, yeah. So great. So great.
Then he came back with All Before I Die, which it had those it was a great like power pop song, but it had those like Oasis vibes to it, which I think he wanted to capture at the same time.
Loved it. Yeah. Well, Eric Bazillion and we wanted it to sound kind of Beatlesque and Oasis-ish. So we did the original demo. It's pretty much all the same parts. That's how it came out. And it thrills me to death, that the bad boy, is saying, I hope I'm old before I die. I'm not going to kill myself, and he lived and he survived. And that really is a beautiful thing.
It goes without saying what an impact you've had on the music landscape with your endless list of fantastic songs. But particularly for me, as like a big 80s and 90s hard rock fan, you were certainly one of the names I always instantly got excited about seeing on the album liner notes. I knew instantly that would be the song I'd be most looking forward to hearing. So if we kind of want to dive into some of the stories throughout your career, but you're set to release your autobiography, Living on a Prayer, Big Songs, Big Life, in just a few weeks. So I don't want to spoil too many of the stories for when people read the book. But what could you tell us about how the book originally came to be and how you began collaborating with David Ritz, who you've done the book with?
We started the book about 6 years ago. We weren't always working on it, but we'd meet up in different cool places, an island in Greece. We met up in New York City in our apartment there, in Nashville. We met in LA. So we were meeting at all these different locations at these different times. And the way it would work is he'd ask me questions and he'd record my answers. Then he'd send them immediately to the transcriber. So those are my words. And so then he'd put 2 and 2 together and make sense out of my rambling musings. So the thing is that to make a book be not just a puff piece about how great I am, I wanted it to be real. Because deep down, I wanted my sons just know me as daddy. I'm just like an open checkbook and they barely call me. They're in college now. But I wanted to leave them something. So at some point they might read it maybe I might not be around, but they get to hear my voice, get to know my stories, get to know where they came from. And that was a huge motivation for me, because when my husband Curtis and I had them, I was already 48. So I was an older dad. And so now I'm a way older dad trying to look like a younger dad. But that was a huge motivation for me. And it really is kind of what I call a reckoning, the book, because I lay bare all the mistakes I made. I acknowledge the people that I hurt along the way. And so all of those things, have been inside of me, and now they're out. And so I don't have to hold on to them. So it was very emotional, very painful, especially my relationship with my mother, who passed away 11 years ago. She was a single mom. She was an immigrant to this country from Cuba. She barely spoke English. She was very beautiful, but she had no money, no connections. And we lived in the projects, and she worked at Burger King, and she was a realtor, and she sold mops. And she, like, the back of her trunk had 20 different businesses, all with different business cards with aliases. Some of them were Latin names, Latino names like Elena Rodriguez Martinez Casals. Or if she was going to a place that maybe would be prejudiced against her for being Latin, she'd be Helen Barrett. So I've saved all of these cards because I'm very kind of in a way awed by her hustle. She didn't let anything stop her from being a dreamer. And that's how I am. And no matter what happens, I'm really optimistic and believing in my ability to somehow launch another climb up the mountain of success, because, I still have a lot of dreams, a lot of things that I haven't accomplished.
How does bearing your soul in a book format compared to bearing your soul in a song? Does a song give people more room to translate it in their own way, whereas in a book, it is literally the facts and your words on paper? Is it a different feeling for you?
Well, I really stopped writing confessional songs after my group Desmond Child and Rouge broke up.
Right.
That was the year 1979. And we had made this fabulous blue-eyed soul pop, Latino, rock melange of styles with these gorgeous voices of Maria Vidal, Diana Grosselli, and Miriam Valley. They were Rouge. So it was Desmond Child and Rouge. And we're right caught in the horrible cancel culture moment when somebody decided that disco was bad. And so they started burning the records of the Bee Gees and Motown and Evelyn Champagne King, all the things that the gay community was taking pride in, Casey and the Sunshine Band. These were the anthems of gay pride. And somebody said, you know what? That stuff is just too gay. We're into rock, man. So all of a sudden from 79 into 80, everything shifted. And we rode the wave. So I came out with an idea to make a second album. We made it the same year, 1979. I wrote it and we sang it and we mixed it all in 28 days. The album's called Runners in the Night. And that's, reissued on BMG Records. And the opening song's called The Truth Comes Out. In that song, I basically come out because at that time I was boyfriend and girlfriend with Maria Vidal. We're the ones that, lived together. We were the main people keeping our group together. In fact, she worked as a waitress and her waitress name was Gina Velvet. So Gina works the diner all day.
That's fantastic. Every time you must hear that song, a picture or a memory must flash in your head.
Oh, absolutely. Because Maria, was and still is a very beautiful Latin woman. And people called her Gina because she reminded them of Gina Lollobrigida. And so that year was so stressful. The girls went on Broadway with Gilda Radner. Then Gilda got us musical guests of Saturday Night Live, even though we hadn't earned it with our own music yet. But sometimes in those days, they would put on kind of a hot new act that was kind of breaking. And it was so stressful because with everything that was going on, we toured the country, we did all this promotion. I realized I was more gay than I was bi. Because before I was kind of rock star bi. David Bowie, Mick Jagger, or something, what we thought was, right? Whether they were or not. I'm not making any judgments on that. But, I always said, well, I'm attracted to both and I'm a rock star. I can do whatever I want. I'm not gay, I'm just a rock star. But when I was growing up now, I was 22, 23, I was turning into a man and I was realizing that my real natural orientation was same-sex attraction. So it was very, very painful because I met somebody that, this younger guy that lived across the street from where I lived with Maria, began this, secret love affair and running back and forth between the two apartments. It was exciting and terrible, and it was very unfair to her. And we were at a time when I thought, well, if people knew I was gay, they wouldn't listen to my music. And you know what? I would have been right. Even though in the song The Truth Comes Out, it says, I confess my innermost feelings with strangers in the dark, and my words fly like sparks from my mouth as the truth comes out. That really was my confession. And I thought, well, I can have it all. But at that point, it took such a strain on my relationship with Maria. We couldn't continue with the band. And that was unfortunate. We didn't have people that were surrounding us that knew how to guide us through it so that we could keep our group together. So we all journeyed out there because there was always somebody that was saying, you don't need them. You're a star unto yourself.
Someone whispering in your ear.
Yeah, usually the person that they were, sleeping next to, were saying, you're a star. You don't need them, because them took that person away from the other person. And you know how it is with relationships. People get jealous, especially when the other people are also performers, that aren't making it. So everybody had this chatter going on. And so we said, okay, fuck it. We're going to make it on our own as solo artists. We all went down these very difficult journeys because we kept ourselves together and gave each other courage. And we did crazy things like putting up posters on the streets, stenciling the sidewalks outside of the record companies with our name. And the gig we were playing, Desmond Child de Rouge at Tracks, we put so much into it and we lived for the fight. Because, when you live for the fight, that's all that you got, like in Living on a Prayer. And so those were the golden times, really the hungry years. I had just graduated from NYU, where my sons go now.
Yeah, your boys are there as well. Have you been back since they've been on campus?
Yes, of course. And about 6 years ago, I was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Steinhardt School. And it's funny because I thought, okay, they're going to give me a little diploma. So I show up at Radio City Music Hall, and there's 4,000 people, the kids and their parents and siblings, filling up Radio City Music Hall. And then I'm like off in the wings, and they said, well, you're going to give the commencement speech. It's like, what? This is your day. And they had made a kind of montage of my songs with dance and music and people singing. And it was so impressive on the stage of Radio City Music Hall. I didn't have a speech.
How are you in those situations at just winging it?
Well, what I was winging it because I had given a speech a few months before at ASCAP. I was awarded the Founders Award. So I dialed up that speech, changed a few things. On my feet, I was pretty good. My opening line was, I guess no one really checked my grades before they offered me this award. And the whole place roared. So I had them in my hand. I mentioned my sons. I said, my sons, Roman and Nero, hopefully they'll come to NYU. What do you think? People went crazy. And of course, that's where they went. Told the beautiful story about how at NYU, you meet unexpected people. And people who may in the future be running the world, let's say. In my case, I met a singer named Keith Barrow. And his mother, the Reverend Willie Barrow, was one of the people that started with Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesse Jackson out of Chicago and, the whole civil rights movement. But he was completely out, he was fantastic, huge smile. And he sang like Aretha meets Stevie Wonder. And I wrote songs for him and with him, and I helped him do his audition for Columbia Records, which helped me get a foot in the door of the music business. He got a deal there. He made a couple of albums, but then he was one of the first people that died of AIDS in 1983, I think. Right off the bat. And it was so shocking. I mean, it just shook me to my core. And also was one of those things that drove me into like spiritual cults and things like that. I was looking for family. I was looking for safety. I was looking for a reason for everything. And I really went down some like strange paths. So going back to that speech, I mentioned him because I had met him at NYU. And his sister was one of the heads of admissions and, student relations and all that, who I'd never met before. And she was on the stage and she started crying. It was so emotional that I managed to pull the story together. And that's my gift in a way, is like to put two and two together and try to see a kind of longer arc, like a bigger story with the artists, like we talked about Robbie Williams, with John Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora. We collaborated on, our first song was You Give Love a Bad Name. And then we wrote Livin on a Prayer, which is the title of my autobiography. And so in that case, John had expressed an interest in writing a story song about a working class couple, because he didn't say the names at that time, but he actually had a couple that he went to high school with that got married, Bonnie and Joe. And so in my mind, I was thinking about, me and Maria, who was Gina, and Richie later on said, I was thinking about my parents, because they really struggled to make ends meet. And so we all brought our personal story to the song, and magic happened. At first, John didn't want to record the song. He thought it was too sentimental because he wanted to rock, And Richie and I literally got on our hands and knees, half joking but serious, begging him to at least record it. And when he went to do so, magic happened. And that song has stood the test of time. We recently got certification of 1 billion Spotify airplays. They gave John a beautiful plaque. They didn't give me one. But anyway, it said Bon Jovi on it. So I guess it was the band, but not the writers, But that song has changed the lives of many people. I remember once when we got a letter from a guy that said that he had made plans to jump off a bridge and he wanted to end his life. So he's driving to the bridge. He jumps out of the car, the radio playing and all that. He gets ready to lean forward to jump off the bridge, and Livin on a Prayer comes on. And he said, oh, wait a second, that's my favorite song. So he gets back in the car. By the last chorus, he drives back to his house and he lived. And those stories like that, many people that went through many hard times write us and tell us how that song got them through these many hard times. And there was a moment in Chicago where all the people that were, trapped in their apartments in COVID opened their windows, and they all had arranged to make a citywide sing of Livin on a Prayer. How cool is that?
I mean, how many years old would the song have been at that point? So 86?
We wrote it in 86. So 1986 to now, what is that?
My maths are terrible, but it's getting on for like 35 years or something.
More.
Probably.
I got to get a calculator.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, though. That song is transformative. The person that sings it gets hope. And then if they're feeling it, the listener feels it. And so that's the beauty of music. My acting coach passed away last year, Sandra Seacat, always spoke about the wounded healer. And in an acting setting, you learn a script, you learn a part, and you bring your, especially if it's drama, you bring the wounded sides of yourself into the part. As you do the part, you become healed from your own past as you merge with the character in the story. So when the audience sits there, they are healed. If it's real, if it's true, and it's not acting, it's being, it's goosebumps everywhere. I mean, my class, when I started with her in 1979, had Jessica Lange, Mickey Rourke, Michelle Pfeiffer, had Frances Fisher, who was in Titanic. Gosh, like so many people. Cicely Tyson came. We helped her with a part. Oh, one of my good friends, Lawrence Bender, who produced Pulp Fiction. And of course, Al Gore's, epic An Inconvenient Truth. He and I were the non-actors. He was a dancer actually in college. So we were the non-actors that were there like flies on the wall. And I learned from Sandra how to work with deep artists like Jessica Lange. And so I use that approach when I work with singers. I try to get right to the point of, where are you in your life right now? What do you feel like you need to say? What is the thing that drives you? What is your soul calling out to the world to say? When you can lock that in and that person sings and brings it to life, that's when you have hit records.
After the Rouge stuff, you kind of stopped with the confessional stuff. Is that when you moved into that style of writing?
Well, it happened by mistake. Paul Stanley of Kiss had seen our posters around town. This is before our first record came out. So he came to a little underground, literally underground club on the Upper West Side on 72nd Street called Trax, Trax. And the dressing room was in the wing, like the stage was like right there. So we were getting ready, and all of a sudden this guy pops his head in we didn't recognize, and he says, "I'm Paul Stanley of Kiss." It's like, what? Because no one had ever seen his face. They were always masked.
I was wondering that. I mean, did anyone know who he was?
No.
Or was Kiss without makeup? Was it not that a big deal in the New York underground scene, like the worst kept secret? Or
nobody knew who he was or Gene Simmons. They went out with handkerchiefs. They were masking way before COVID, you know. And he said, I saw you guys, and I just want to let you know that at the front table is George Harrison of the Beatles. And we were like, what? We're going to sing for one of the Beatles now? So I poked my head out and I looked, and it was like, there he was, big white teeth, like smiling and everything. So we did the show, and Paul came backstage after the show and said, hey, let's be friends. Let's write together. So he co-wrote first a song with me for Desmond Child and Rouge. We were like in the process of making our record. And that song's called The Fight, you know, left, right, left, you know, so it's like push and pull you down. Livin' la vida. Look, I mean, I'm still with those, you know, fist in the air chants. And then we said, okay, well, your turn now. I went to SIR. It's a rehearsal studio. Kiss was on a lunch break, and Paul invited me to come and meet him there to try writing something. So we pulled this big canvas off the piano that was off the side. You know, no pianos in Kiss, right? So they didn't need it. So I sat at the piano, and together we wrote, I Was Made for Loving You.
just the two of you together, no one else involved?
No. Later on, they added Vinny Poncia, the producer, because he added things to the recording, you know, how it turned out and everything. So that's why there's 3 writers on it. But we wrote the song, and that song changed the course of history because it was the first song that had heavy metal guitars with a dance beat. And all of a sudden it opened people's mind. Now we're talking 1978. We're talking 1978. Remember, we're going to the terrible year of 79 when all the dance records were thrown in a pile and burned in a stadium in Chicago, right? I recall movies where the Nazis were burning books, you know, if it had anything about them that was Jewish, like what people are doing now, you know, in various states, burning books or taking them out of libraries if they have anything to do with sexual orientation or, you know, something liberal. It's all like total censorship, banning of books. You know, it's like, don't read it then. You know, if you're a parent and you don't like the content, you know, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't be accessible to a kid that might want to find out about their own feelings. You know, and so it's really terrible, terrible, terrible what they're doing right now. I never thought that days like that would come back. But anyway, in 1979, that song opened the door for Prince, opened the door for Madonna, opened the door for, you know, Michael Jackson, Beat It, where it's dance beats with rock guitars.
What was your reaction to seeing that song blow up, not just in the US, but it was like a worldwide hit for Kiss?
I was thrilled because at that point, I was still broke. I hadn't made any money. And so now all of a sudden, big money started coming in, and I was able to get my mother out of the projects and buy her an apartment on Miami Beach.
Oh, wow. How was that feeling?
It was just wonderful. I mean, she wasn't allowed to bring anything old. No clothes, no old furniture, nothing. I replaced everything with brand new stuff.
What was their reaction to that, though? Was she like, no, I need to...
No.
This can be used, or was she up for it?
Oh, no, because her dream was always to live on Miami Beach. So I bought her this gorgeous apartment with a view of the water. And, it was a 2-bedroom apartment, very chic, very beautiful. And she had her own garage downstairs and bought her a brand new car. As soon as the money came in, I was able to fulfill her dream. And so that gave me a lot of good feelings because my mother really suffered a lot. It's the frustration, like I said, of being an immigrant from Cuba, a woman, poor, not socially connected. Basically, the only thing she had was her talent. She was a songwriter, and she was always out at nightclubs trying to see if she could get somebody to even sing one of her songs, and her beauty. She looked like a movie star.
Would you say she was one of the first people who influenced you to write songs? Or was it a combination of hearing stuff on the radio?
No. I mean, that, of course, in the projects, we would listen to a station that you'd go from Aretha Franklin to the Rolling Stones to Dionne Warwick to Bob Dylan. One station played everything. And it wasn't like what happened later, which I think is kind of good because it created more opportunities. But when it's like all rock, 24/7.
That's a good voice for it, that is. I can hear that on the radio.
Hold on just 1 second. Then made me some kind of crazy tea that doesn't taste good. Are you watching Happy Valley?
I'm not. No, should I be watching Happy Valley?
Oh my God. It's the best thing ever. Oh my God. It's set in Yorkshire area.
Yeah.
And Sheffield, Leeds, all of that.
That's just like an hour north of me. That's right where I am.
And so they have a very specific accent. So we have to put the subtitles to hear what the heck they're saying.
That's terrible. It can't be that
But,
bad.
it's about a female detective, police officer, and she, her personal life and the crimes that are happening are all like interweaving. It's so intense. It's so great. But no matter what's happening, there could be a dead body on the floor. It's like, she's dead, love. Shall I put on the kettle? Everything revolves around tea. Can I make you a cuppa? Will you have some tea? So I'm like hooked on English tea. I go lowbrow and highbrow, PG Tips and Fortnum and Mason.
Okay.
Right, because I heard that Queen Elizabeth II drank this Assam tea from Fortnum and Mason. That's a rumor.
You need some Yorkshire tea then if you're watching Happy Valley and it's all set around there. Get some proper Yorkshire tea.
Oh my God, yes. Yorkshire tea, exactly. So anyway, they're making tea the whole time. And it's kind of the thing that cures everything. So I'm like hooked on everything. And of course, I've now spent like these wonderful times up in, Whitley Bay, Newcastle. And I just have a feeling about the whole, eastern coast of England.
You need a holiday cottage out here somewhere.
You know that my mother was married to an American whose parents were English, and they were from Manchester.
All right, cool.
He wasn't my biological father, but he's the father on my birth certificate, John Barrett. And that was my name, before I changed it to Desmond Child, because I thought John Barrett kind of sounded like an insurance salesman or something. I wanted to sound like Elton John. Desmond Child.
Nailed it.
And I wanted to sound very British, Desmond Child. I'm just such an Anglophile. It's like I love everything about England and Scotland and Ireland. I just love all of that. That's why I'm hooked on Vikings and The Last Kingdom.
We sidetracked onto TV shows, but you're saying about the radio stations. It's something that's been mentioned on this show so many times from different other artists saying AM radio and things like that. It just play this mixed bag of different artists. So you got this like real all-encompassing knowledge of different styles, which seems to be lost these days. Everyone just listens to specifically what they like.
It's very limiting. But sometimes what they like is really what their friends like, not necessarily what they would choose, but there's social pressure. I know my sons are deeply into urban music. They know every artist. They know every rap lyric. They can recite them on their own. I mean, even when they were much smaller, they weren't allowed to use the F word. F-bombs. So they would do these raps that had the F word all the way through it, but they would like do it and just kind of mute where the F-bomb happened. So they would be going like mute, and they just keep going like that.
There's a skill to that as well.
But then, it didn't take long before they were just saying the F word and there was nothing we could do about it. But they are so deeply into urban music and they're not really into any other kind of music. And so I'm like, do as you wish. That's your generation. That's what you guys are all about. That speaks for you. Then more power to you. But I personally have benefited from knowing classical music, jazz, Latin music, rock music, folk music. It's all part of me. And little threads from all of those things come together and help me create new sounds.
I'm going to throw it back to Kiss for a second. Did you ever go to a Kiss concert once I Was Made for Loving You blew up on the Dynasty Tour and see it live?
Yes, it was the most thrilling thing ever. And they still perform it in the show. It was just so exciting. And one of the most beautiful things about my relationship with Paul Stanley is he's so supportive of me. He's the one that gave my phone number to John Bon Jovi.
Right. I was wondering how the connection was. I didn't know if the label had reached out.
No, it was Paul. I always say, without Paul Stanley, there would be no Desmond Child, because he opened the door to all opportunities. He brought, wealth so I could take care of my mother, to be able to not have to work a day job anymore. I was a cab driver. I worked at a Xerox store. I worked at a sporting goods store, all 3 jobs, and went to college and did gigs at night. And I'm telling my sons, why don't you guys get like a part-time job? They said, oh, that would take away from our studies. It's like, your studies? Are you studying that much? Whatever. But Paul Stanley was so sweet that he wrote the introduction to my book.
Oh, fantastic. How was it reading that for the first time?
So great. And he also went in the studio and recorded it for my audiobook. And I've been making a Lifetime documentary at the same time. So he sat for an interview for that. All this year. I mean, he's so sweet and so supportive. I'm so excited because I've asked him if he would invite us to the final Kiss show, which is December 2nd at Madison Square Garden. And he said, I've got you covered. Backstage passes, the whole thing. The final Kiss show.
That's going to be amazing.
Yeah. So I know it's not the end of Kiss, because there's got to be like a movie of, the young Paul and Gene starting Kiss and climbing their way up and all the crazy things that happened, and they did. I'm just wondering who will be cast in that. And then, of course, I went to see the ABBA Voyage.
How was that? I've had some friends who are like rock guys, and they've been to see it, and they say it's the best gig I've ever been to.
Best gig ever. So impressive. I've been twice. The second time, I knew what was coming, but I started getting into the feeling and their own storytelling, how their, relationships broke up. And, like that song, The Winner Takes It All. And when she sings that, it's like, wow, with a tear in her eye. I mean, it's just so moving.
Do you think something like that's going to be the future of concerts down the line?
Yes, I do, because there's so many people that deserve to be seen in that way, like Whitney Houston. How about Barbra Streisand? There are bands that are still performing like Aerosmith and Bon Jovi, but eventually in the future, I could see that Slippery tour on the stage with him. He's there. It's not a look-alike. They're there. It's so incredible, the ABBA Voyage. You see every pore on their face, every little pimple, every little crooked tooth, everything perfect. And it just gives you goosebumps. And they're kind of self-effacing. They're funny. They each give a little story. I thought the band was holographic. Somebody told me the band, this huge 10-piece band with singers and everything, I thought that was hologram also. But, somebody said, no, they're real musicians there. So it's the 4 of them and then the live musicians, and the sound that comes around you just takes you over. It's so well done. I couldn't recommend it more. And, there might be a Desmond Child one in the future. I certainly have enough hits to put in the show.
100%.
And maybe tell the story of a little kid that, that is full of doubt, but still works his way through, this world of popular music and rock.
When you obviously work with people like Paul Stanley, John Bon Jovi, when you head into a room with people like this, do you see a star when you first meet them? Bon Jovi already had a couple of albums, but they weren't an household name. But do you yourself pick up on like X Factor with certain people?
I do. I feel that, because you feel not only how they hold themselves, but their destiny is in the room. Because truly, there are so few real stars. There are a lot of people that can learn how to sing, learn how to write songs, learn how to program, learn how to do all these things. But it doesn't mean that they're artists. They could be craftsmen, master craftsmen at what they do. But a real artist is somebody like Sinead O'Connor, That's a true artist with integrity. You know, Joan Jett, true artist with integrity. Elton John, a true artist. Adele, Amy Winehouse. I mean, these people are different. They're not the same. And sometimes I feel that they are stars not because they're exuding light, but we project our light into them. And they have so many people doing that then they're like a mirror that shines bright, extra bright. You know, 30,000 people are putting everything they've got onto that stage, all that love. All they need to do is reflect it. And they got 30,000 exploding lights coming out of them. That's what a star can do.
I've never thought of it in that way.
I know. I just recently started thinking about that. What is it that makes a star? How many people can be played on the radio in a day? You know, and it's usually on repeat. You'll hear Ariana Grande, you'll hear Katy Perry, you'll hear The Weeknd, you'll hear Rihanna, you hear Beyonce, you hear these people, and they're great. But how many can be in a minute and in 3 minutes? I mean, time is limited. And people are also listening to radio and all that, but that's not all they're doing. They're doing other things, but the music is going on also. And so the fact is, for all of those things to come together to be a star, because it's not just thinking you want to be a star, it's the management, the social media, the promotion of the record company, the lawyer, the massage therapist. It's like everything, you know, the nails, you know, everything that goes into creating a star. You line all those things up and that star is bright too. And people don't usually think about the behind the scenes efforts that deliver this wonderful reflector onto the stage.
But they have to have that initial core of it. If John Bon Jovi walked into a room, you could feel something from him.
Yes, that's why it's so hard for people to disguise themselves.
Right.
It's like, oh, well, there's Steven Tyler in disguise. It's like, it's worse because the disguise is ugly. It's like, well, why is Steven Tyler wearing that? It's like, that's not cool, you know? So I think that who they are, yes, changes the molecules in a room. But I mean, how does a colony of ants know to just serve the queen, which is one slightly larger ant? How do they know to go out far, far, far to bring in nutrition to feed the one queen? How do they know? Because there's an energy, there's maybe hormones, there's things that people who are stars have. And I'll tell you one person who has that mega, and that's Barbara Streisand.
Yeah.
Who I had the lifetime dream come true of writing a song for her. And she loved it so much that she and I co-produced together on her last studio album called Walls. It was really a life-changing experience because when she comes into the room, it's like no other.
Had you met her before, or was that the first time you'd met?
Well, I had met her before, but it didn't turn out to anything. It was like Diane Warren and I had co-written a song for her, One Look in Your Eyes, right? And it really wasn't her style. But we got called by the record company to write her something. So I went to her cottage that was next to her mansion where she had a piano. Everything was white. I wore all white. I didn't know why. She wore all white. And then the record company guys were all in black suits with white shirts and black ties, sitting like penguins on the couch. And she was sort of lounging on the floor. And I sat and, you know, I had the lyrics, the song was just written. This is like a long time ago. So there was no easy typing. There were no laptops. So this was all handwritten, and I kind of untangle this little piece of paper and I'm singing it. And she goes, hold on a second. Do you type? And I said, excuse me? Do you type? I mean, do you type with the nails going like, right? And I go, yes. She says, well, why don't you type out the lyrics? I can't deal with this. And so one of the guys on the couch said, oh, don't worry. We'll get that for you. She said, well, what if I want to hear it tonight in the middle of the night? What am I going to do? And he said, well, he's going right to the studio and he's going to make you a demo of it like right now. That wasn't like planned. You know, I had flown from Miami to LA and it was like an hour later, I was at Henson's studio recording the demo of the song,
wow,
which went directly to her so she could hear it in the middle of the night. In the end, she didn't choose a song. It really wasn't perfect for her, but Cher cut it. So it didn't go to waste, of course. It was a little too rock for Streisand at that time. And so decades went by and she was making this record called Walls, which was about her feelings about what was going on in the world. And so her executive music supervisor, Jay Landers, asked me to see if I could come up with something. So I decided to write a song on my own. I told you I didn't write songs on my own after Desmond Child and Rouge. It was all collaborative with bands and other co-writers like Diane and all that. And so I thought about Barbara, and I first saw her in a musical movie called Funny Girl when I was 15 years old. And I think it was 1968. In that movie, she portrays Fanny Brice, the Ziegfeld Follies, comedian, singer, and it's her life story. So Barbara's playing her. She had been playing her on Broadway as a young woman. She was 19 or something. By this point, when she made the movie, she was in her early 20s. And she's on a tugboat going across the Hudson River. And she's, singing that song, Don't Rain on My Parade. Don't rain on my parade, right? And so she's on the tugboat and she holds these flowers in the air right as she passes the Statue of Liberty, who's holding the torch. That's an epic shot. It made such an impression on me because ever since then, Barbara is my Lady Liberty. She stands for all the right things, and she puts her money where her mouth is. She's donating and creating foundations to help researching women's heart issues because nobody seems to give them the same kind of attention. She does so many things. And so I decided to write a song called Lady Liberty, and she loved it. And I really studied her music this time. I really listened to all her greatest songs, and I started to see a connection between the kinds of melodies she sang and the syntax of the words and the jumps in her melody, And so, Lady Liberty. See, it's not like da 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 da, it's da 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 da. And the way the vowels sound, she's a special instrument. In fact, I told her that she created a genre of music. The only problem is that she's the only one in it. And she loved that. She had a good laugh with that. But I told her about that moment, made such a deep impression on me. I was 15. And, I told her that was the moment that I turned gay. She said, everybody tells me that. It's like, wow. It was funny. I said it as a joke. She said, everybody tells me that. That's what made them gay. So, if you don't want to be gay, don't watch Funny Girl. Okay? Stay away. Stay away from that film.
Needs a sticker on it, like a parental advisory sticker from the late 80s. It needs a this movie will turn you gay sticker on there.
Yeah, this movie will turn you gay, young man. So, she came in so well prepared, and she sang through the song 2 times, and it was perfect.
Oh, I love that.
She came back the next day and she said, I'm good, right? And I went, oh my God, what do I say to that? It's like, of course you are. She just laughed.
Once you leave a writing session, you go away and the band hits the studio. I'm like talking when you're not in the producer role. Are you sometimes blown away when you hear the finished song? Do you get excited, maybe give notes prior to them going into the studio? Or how is it hearing that finished product from maybe a piano demo or the initial idea?
That was the case with a producer named Bruce Fairburn, who was producing Aerosmith and Bon Jovi up in Canada. And the tragedy is that he passed away young. And so he didn't make all the records he could have made. Bruce Fairburn was a genius producer. He produced Slippery When Wet and New Jersey. He also did Permanent Vacation, and maybe it was Get a Grip. Those were the most successful records I've ever been a part of, and I didn't produce them. They were songs that we wrote, they were on cassette. Next time I heard them, Dude Looks Like a Lady. I saw the video. Beyond just hearing the song, the first time I heard it was in the video. And it was like, oh my God, so great. And it was so tragic that Bruce Fairburn passed away.
Did you guys meet?
I only met him one time. I went to Vancouver to work with the band, but I wasn't going in the studio. I was just kind of waiting in the lounge. John and I would be working on lyrics. The band, let's say, we're doing power chords or something. And the engineer was Bob Rock. And Bruce was one of those family men who went home at 5:30. Then Bob would be there, slugging it out with the guys doing the multi-layers of power chords and all that. But it was Bruce Fairburn's sonic vision. I don't think either band was happy that the other band was working with him. Let's just put it that way. And there were like one would come in one door, the other one would go out the other door, because Bruce was like rotating them. But that's when I was pleasantly surprised to hear my song come to life. And of course, when Bonnie Tyler sang If You Were a Woman and I Was a Man, and another song that I had written for her called Lovers Again, they were on the same record that came in after Total Eclipse of the Heart. And the way he produced it was very similar to my demo that I sent him, but better. I was just so pleasantly surprised. And then later on, when he got busy making Bat Out of Hell 2, then I inherited Bonnie Tyler and recorded an incredible record called Hide Your Heart that had like so many hits on it. But the record company, especially Steve Winwood's brother, Muff Winwood, was her A&R guy, wasn't hearing it. I'll just tell you some of the songs that were on the record. The first time ever recorded, The Best. You're simply the best, better than all the rest.
It's going nowhere.
It's going nowhere. 2 years later, it was Tina Turner's biggest hit of all time. The same arrangement. And, it was just criminal. I had Hide Your Heart, which was then cut by Ace Frehley, Robin Beck.
Keep counting them.
It was like a slew of people. Then Tears in the Rain. It had, Jesus, there's so many. I did a version of the Bee Gees, To Love Somebody. To Love Somebody. 2 years later, Michael Bolton had a #1 song with To Love Somebody. Sounded just like our record. Same arrangement. They didn't push it. And her manager, was a person that I didn't really get along with, the guy that was her manager at that time. And I couldn't get him to see that he needed to really break through. So, I had pleaded with Steven Tyler and John Bon Jovi. I said, how can you help me? And John came up with this idea. He said, well, why don't we go and do an acoustic set of just Beatles songs with Bonnie at the Cat Club in Manhattan with Steven Tyler, the three of them, for like a, what they call that, unplugged or something like that, right?
Holy shit.
And the head of promotion at that time was a guy named Jack Rovner. And he said, well, honestly, I don't think you can get those two people to sing with Bonnie. I said, but it was John's idea and he's right here. Talk to him. And he said, hey, yeah, man, I'm ready to do it. We spoke to Steven. He's ready to do it. They wouldn't pay to have her fly over to do that as a promotion for her album, not even sing any songs from the record, just all Beatles set. How cool would that have been?
That would have been incredible.
Yeah. So ironically, Jack Rovner for many years later on became Bon Jovi's manager. Isn't that crazy? And I don't know what happened to Muff Winwood. He's like a legendary A&R guy, but in this case,
he missed that. Yeah.
He missed it. And I was so frustrated and so sad for Bonnie because she was out there touring and she couldn't sing The Best anymore because people thought she was doing a cover of Tina Turner. Had to drop it from the set. How unfair is that?
Yeah.
Her song first.
Yeah.
First ever. I love Bonnie Tyler. She's pretty much my favorite artist to work with.
Yeah.
She comes prepared. She doesn't even look at the lyrics. She knows the songs by heart and she puts everything into it. Like every note she sings has emotion.
Oh, fantastic.
True emotion. She's not thinking about her nail and hair appointment coming up. She's in the moment. And then at night, we would, her husband at that time, he was always with her. He always is, Robert, he would take us out to dinner with the finest wines and all this kind of stuff. We would have the best laughs, the best time. So I can mark the time of making Bonnie Tyler's record, Hide Your Heart, as one of the happiest, funnest, creative experiences of my life. And she was so sweet. Last year, I did a concert in Athens, Greece. The concert was called Desmond Child Rocks the Parthenon. And it was a benefit concert for the Acropolis Museum to raise awareness and raise money for the return of the Parthenon sculptures, that have been, were stolen 200 years ago and really should be repatriated to Greece. And, that's become very political. And I don't understand why. The thing is, it's not like the Mona Lisa that was painted in Italy being in the Louvre in France. That's one work of art. In the case of the Parthenon sculptures, they are relics from a temple. And the whole Greek national identity is wrapped up in those sculptures. It's so deep. You talk to any Greek person, they start crying. I don't understand why museums all over the world are giving back items that were stolen, absconded with, Nazi stolen art, and all these things that, the provenance, they're giving it back. And I hope that the concert that we did, we filmed it, and it's going to be part of my Lifetime documentary, will help to raise awareness. Imagine if somebody came and stole a piece of Stonehenge, and then it was sitting in some museum, let's say in Saudi Arabia, in the middle of the desert, where no one could even see it. And yet it belongs on the top of those two rocks. Mm-hmm. Imagine it missing. Yeah. How would the people of the United Kingdom feel about that? No, it would be a cause for war. It would not be tolerated. So that's why I'm trying to, show kind of like that's a parallel.
Yeah.
Because the national identity is so wrapped up in this artwork. It's not just like one statue. Mm-hmm. It's a huge collection of pieces that they savagely chipped out. A lot of them fell and broke on the ground. I don't know. It really meant a lot to me because when I was little, my mother was sculpted by this incredible American sculptress named Lee Burnham. And it's a portrait of my mother, all pulled in, their men behind her, whispering to her and all this kind of stuff. It was the only thing that we had of value, the only thing. And my mother was forced to sell it for $1,200, which was like a fortune to her. I came home from school one day and it was gone. And I was crying, and it's like, how could you sell it? And she was crying. She said, I had no choice. I had to sell it or we wouldn't survive. So it took me 45 years to track it back down. And I was able to buy it back for $35,000 from people that had inherited it from the person that bought it originally. And I had set up our New York apartment with a blank wall for it. So it's like the Acropolis Museum, like just waiting for it. And I was able to bring it back, put it up. I brought my mother, who was kind of already, suffering from dementia, but I brought her to see it. And she started weeping and she touched it. And it was like, wow, it meant so much to me to be able to deliver that back to her. And she said, it was so important that we got this back because our identity was wrapped up in it. So that's why I didn't realize it till I came back from the concert on the plane. We were on our way to New York. And I realized when I walked into the apartment, that's why I feel so much about the Parthenon sculptures, because it's like us. And it was gone for Jesus, a fourth of how long the Parthenon sculptures have been gone, 45 years. And it's very, very beautiful. And in my book, I talk about it. And there's a picture of me as a little kid standing in front of it. And so those are the kind of personal touches. But you see how life is, right? You're creating your own story as you live it. And then it's astounding how it feels like the universe is making things happen. But it's really us that makes the story. It's us that's putting two and two together. And we see it as a coincidence. It may be completely random, but it means something. It has meaning to us. And so that's why I think that art is so important, because the story of the person that made the art and their triumph and tragedy and their soul is in it. It's in it. And when you hear it, it awakens your own soul, makes you more human again in a world that's pulling us away from being human. AI, what the heck is that? It's like pulling us away. And I'm guilty. I'm on my iPhone all the time. And it makes me nervous when it's not near me.
It's become a part of us, hasn't it?
I think they're retraining my brain. It's like, I don't feel right if it's not near me. I feel like I'm missing out on something. It's like my lifeline's there. All my contacts are there. My ongoing projects are there. Everything that I'm pushing is right there. And when I left it at the restaurant or all these crazy things, it's like, I'm not right.
Yeah.
And so I've been reading up and people saying, well, why don't you give yourself a telephone break?
Yeah, have a detox.
Put the phone in a basket and let it go. It's not going anywhere. It's in the basket. When you walk in, just put it in the basket. Now make dinner for your family, not be like making dinner and checking your phone, like multitasking. It's gotten crazy.
I try if I go out for a meal with my wife. I know she's going to have her phone, so I leave mine at home. So that's kind of where I try and detach from it that way so I can focus on it.
Yeah, but I bet your eye is kind of looking, when there's like a little ding, it's like, is that someone I know? Is that for me? Is somebody trying to reach me now?
Yeah, they've urgently been ringing my phone at home. They can't get me on that one, so they ring the wife.
Yeah, exactly. I get it.
You've written over 4,000 songs in your career. Do you ever dive back into the archives of material, or are you constantly moving forward and each older song is what leads to the next, so no need to look back?
I think it's more like that because, I always say that you write a song in the now, and there's a piece of now in every song, and that gives it energy. So if you're retreading old ideas and all of that, sometimes it can work, but usually the best of what you've done has been recorded.
There's that spark.
It had that, so it takes writing 4,000 songs to get 80 top 100 songs, right, on the Billboard chart. Of those, maybe 20 made it into the top 20. Of those, maybe 9 made it to the top 3. And then of those, maybe 7 or 8 made it to number 1. So it took 4,000 songs to get 7 songs to be number 1. Now, people have made entire careers out of just one hit song, just one. Like we used to publish the Baha Men, and they sang a song called Who Let the Dogs Out. These guys are living the life off of the one song. So it's really hard to have a hit. So many things have to work in your favor, and you have to be driven to follow through. I recently co-wrote a song with Sam Ryder and my longtime collaborator and co-producer, Andreas Carlson. We went to London. We got together with him, this cool studio that was completely stuck in time in the 70s. And I think songs like I'm Only Human were recorded there. And the curtains are still, weird zigzags, 70s completely. And we wrote this great song together. And finally, I found somebody to do an arrangement for the song. So it was only last night at 2 a.m. that I was able to send it to Sam. And I'm waiting here, is he going to like it? I mean, the song we co-wrote with him, and we got a vocal on him when we wrote it just on guitar. But now we've completely orchestrated it, and it's really great. I think it's up tempo. So I figured he's great at the ballads, but he's going to need some up tempos.
Well, Sam's a rock guy. So what was it like for him working with you? He must have known your catalog of work.
Well, yes. Before I did the Parthenon show, I was looking for an extra singer for the stage, and I had been following him, but he still hadn't won Eurovision. And I was hearing him do a lot of covers, Queen and this and that. And his voice is just endless. Any range. He can sing soft. He can sing in falsetto. He can sing hard. He can sing every which way. He's one of the most astounding singers of all time. And so I was just I wanted to get him. And then all of a sudden he wins Eurovision UK. And then he's on his way, I think, to Italy to be in Eurovision there. And it was impossible to get him. I was almost there, and then boom, he wins the Eurovision. My other band that I work very closely with is the Rasmus.
Another Eurovision.
Yes. Well, I pushed them to doing Eurovision that same year, the year that Sam won, 2022. They had been quiet for a long time. Everybody was doing their own thing. Somebody was living in Singapore. Somebody was living in Australia. Laudy, the lead singer, was living in Hawaii. And he called me and said, can I come to write with you in Greece? Because he knew we were there on vacation. I said, okay. It took him 2 days to get there from Hawaii. When we got together, he said, I'm thinking maybe I should, at this point, because the band hasn't been working, maybe I should be a solo artist. What? I said, yeah, well, I was thinking of going up for Eurovision as a solo artist in Finland in 2023. I said, no, you're not. You're going to go as the Rasmus in 2022, and we're going to write the song right now. It's called Jezebel. And that song, they won, finished Eurovision with it, and they opened the show with it. All yellow, incredible set, and it put them back on the map. And they have a new guitarist, Empu. I said, you have to find a new guitarist. She has to look like Roxette and with tattoos all over and be you can't tell whether it's a boy or a girl. And Empu appeared out of nowhere.
You put it out there in the universe.
Put it out in the universe, and they did it. And so now we're working on their next album together.
Brilliant.
And so this summer, we met again in Greece, and we wrote 18 songs with our co-writer and my co-producer, Marty Fredrickson, who worked a lot with Daughtry and Buck Cherry and Aerosmith and Scott Stapp. He's a real rock dude. we wrote incredible songs. So now we've narrowed it down to the 10, and we start cutting the basic tracks in Nashville the second week of October.
Get in.
So the whole band's going to be there because we said none of this programming. We want the band to be playing the songs. So, because before when they were in different cities and all that, everyone would do their parts separately. I said, that's not a band. Now everyone's going to be playing and it's going to be great. Very exciting. And the band they all look incredible. They look beautiful and young and full of life. And I recently became Laudie's, has a 2-year-old daughter. I became her godfather.
Wonderful.
We did that in Greece. Everybody wore white. We had this beautiful ceremony and I gave a little speech. I said, well, I'm not going to get teary-eyed with this speech. I couldn't get 3 words out.
That hits you. I did my brother's best man speech.
I just couldn't even talk. Then I had to think about something else to get through what, I had written. And it was so deep and we've grown so close. It's one of the most fulfilling creative relationships I have.
Did I see you have a credit on a recent Winger song, Proud Desperado?
Yes, that's right. And Kip came to Athens and played with, because Alice Cooper was one of the artists, and Bonnie Tyler, Rita Wilson, the Rasmus, and Kip played bass.
Yeah. Phenomenal bass player.
And Empu played guitar on Poison and Bed of Nails.
Wow.
And it was so, so exciting. And so Kip said, we should try writing something. And we came up with this song called Proud Desperado. It's very clear what that song's about. All these people that really are out there being misled and they feel like they're doing the right thing because they feel so displaced. Mm-hmm. They don't want to join in with people of all kinds and make, one happy world. They want their world to be how it was.
Yeah.
And they're willing to fight to the death for it. So that's why we call the song Proud Desperado, because we feel the pain of these people, but we also see how they're just manipulated by these tyrants and people that are tending towards authoritarianism. How does that protect democracy in America? I don't get that.
You and Kip go way back into like the 80s and 90s.
Yes.
How come you never did any Winger stuff?
Well, I was never invited till now. But he was a co-writer and performer on Trash.
Right, yes.
Which is the album that I produced for Alice Cooper. And we worked very closely together at that time. Trash is a masterpiece unto itself. The song Poison, I don't even know how I came up with those chords. Right now, if you put a gun to my head, I wouldn't be able to play them. I just kind of twiddled and trundled my way through those chords. And, thank God I had the cassette on. And then in the studio, brought it to life. I just love Alice Cooper so much.
Who doesn't? Everyone's in trouble if they don't.
Well, the thing is that when I first got together with him, his real name is Vincent Fournier, and his father was a preacher. And so he grew up in a very religious household. So this whole idea of heaven and hell and devils and all this was something that fascinated him. And so, if you think about it, he invented goth. He invented heavy metal. He invented something. Nobody looked like that. I went to see him when I was 18, dressed with the spider eyes and all that with my girlfriend at the time, Lisa Roberts. And I didn't even tell him till this year that I had gone to see that show. I had sort of forgot, but also it was that wasn't what was on my mind because I was in the moment with Alice, at the time. And I showed him the picture of me all dressed up, in Alice Cooper makeup. And it was wow, you even got the spider eyes. The thing is that he told me that Alice Cooper, first of all, it was the name of the band. And then people started calling him Alice. So Alice Cooper is a character, so we wrote for that character. So Alice Cooper can do things that Vincent Fournier would never do, like bite the head off a doll or something, right? So the thing is that my acting coach that I talked about before, Sandra Seacat, always talked about archetypes. And when you're working with an actor or, even with singers, she always said the closest that actor or actress or artist comes to their ultimate archetype, the more people can recognize them because they're hardwired into our culture, into our system, maybe even visually. It's like if you see something that looks like a snake in the corner of your eye, you're going to jump. You don't even think about it. That's hardwired in our system. So maybe we're like that with people who are stars. So there are only a handful of archetypes: Greek, Roman gods, Egyptian, the saints of the Catholic Church. Everyone has a different energy. The Hindu gods, this one is for this. This one has an elephant face. This one is for luck. This one is for healing. This one is for this, it's for that. And if you go follow culture, like I just named a few, you see that there's always a warrior. And then there's always what we call the Venus, usually in Western culture, a blonde who's very beautiful. It's the symbol of fertility, like the Botticelli, right? And so if you start to see movie stars that came to be famous, first was Jean Harlow, and then came Marilyn Monroe. See, they are that type. And then later on, we have Gwen Stefani. You know, these are all archetypes. And then you have warrior archetype, which is John Bon Jovi. He's a working class warrior. He's Apollo. He's out there with a sword in his hand, which is his microphone, right? And he's going to win the fight. And then you have the Pan, the dark character, right? And off to the side, there's usually, you know, kind of dressed all in black and, you know, all of this. So Alice Cooper and Ozzy Osbourne that have taken on that, you know, Marilyn Manson have taken on those dark characters. Humanity is calling for it because then we don't have to be that. We can see it play out on stage and get our kicks, laugh and, you know, get thrills and scared and this and that, monsters in movies and all this kind of stuff. It plays out something deep in our reptilian part of our brain. So if you look at Billie Eilish, she's a Venus. You look at Elvis Presley, warrior, you know, Apollo, beautiful face. Then there's always a little one, a Puck, Midsummer Night's Dream, up in the tree, you know, Cupid throwing little arrows down at humanity and laughing. So with Laudy from the Erasmus, I say, that's who you are. You're that little guy that has irony and humor and jokes and makes fun of humanity or makes fun of themselves and would not be the hero. So the closer that whoever that person is naturally is to the classic hardwired archetype, the more people recognize the archetype, like the little ants recognize the queen ant, and they go towards it and they buy it.
Yes.
So I always talk about that when I meet someone new. I said, well, your archetype is this.
That's your kind of like your starting point. Figure out what the archetype is and build around that.
Yes. And then look at this other archetype, Medusa, right? With the snakes in the head. Who wears snakes on her head? Lady Gaga. Madonna before her. She's not the Venus type. She's the, you know, I've got attitude type, right? So we recognize her clearly hardwired in ourselves and we buy it. Beyonce, Venus, right? Rihanna, more the bad girl.
Where does someone like Miley Cyrus go? Because she kind of waves between the two.
Bad girl. She's a bad girl. Wrecking ball. She's a wrecking ball. She falls in that category. And Cher, she's not Venus. She's Cleopatra. She's on the dark side. Everything that she produces has that deep, dark place. In the Greek theater, there's always a character like her. And so if you start to see that canopy of characters, then you understand why somebody makes it really big and why others do not. Like Prince, he's not a warrior. He's the Puck, making fun, joking, tempting us, taunting us.
Pushing buttons.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know, and then there's always, you know, like the wistful poet, you know, like Sinead O'Connor, just in her own world, like Bjork.
I want a Desmond Child book with all famous people and you write a little description of where they fall in the archetypes. That'd be great.
Wait, hold on just 1 second. Are you ready for the big reveal? This is the first time I've ever revealed this.
Yes, there it is.
There it is.
How is it to hold like a physical product in your hand like that?
I just got them yesterday. And there it is.
Look at that. It's like an album.
All the hits.
The track listing.
Yeah. Hitmaker to the stars.
Yes. With the Paul Stanley introduction.
Yes.
Oh, that looks amazing.
The handwritten lyrics of Livin on a Prayer.
Oh, wow.
What do you think about that?
Where were they hidden? Are you pretty good at saving stuff like that?
Yeah, I am. I always took myself that seriously. Let's see. Where's Paul Stanley? He's right at the beginning. Ooh. Yeah. Forward by Paul Stanley.
Look at that.
Look at how he's hugging me.
Yes.
With my Viking braid.
Oh, that must be so cool because you started that book years ago.
Well, there's like 100 pictures that I wove through because I hate it when you read a book and then they're just all in the middle and glossy pages and like random and they're not going with the story. My pictures go with what you're reading.
I'm excited to read it when it comes out in a few weeks. That's going to be very, very cool.
It took us 6 years to write the book. And, it was hard. It was hard to write it, hard to look back. I'm a right now person, kind of leaning forward. I don't like looking back. It's painful to look back, but it was the reckoning. My book is a reckoning. It had to happen. So I encourage people to go to my site, Desmond.child, go to the link, pre-order the book. So I have a big first week.
Desmond, I'm going to let you go back to your tea. Oh, you've gone from a flask to a mug now.
That's the Fortnum and Mason. This is the real deal.
All righty.
Thank you so much for interviewing me.
I've loved it. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And so let's check back in. Let's see what happens with the book. And eventually there'll be a documentary.
Ready for it.
So we talk then. That's the thing. I'm at this time in my life, it's the reckoning, but it's also trying to gather up my legacy. I want my sons to know who I was. And I want them to have it all complete and not be like, bring in the dumpster, throw everything into it. We can't deal with this. No, I have everything really, really organized for them.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, I'm going to wish you all the success. I know it's going to be fantastic. I've loved your songs for many, many years, as have millions of other people. So I'm excited to read the stories behind them and how everything came together. But it's been a pleasure, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Huge thanks to Desmond Child for taking so much time with me and really going above and beyond on this episode of the Straight to Video podcast. What a blast. The book Livin on a Prayer, Big Songs Big Life by Desmond Child is released September 19th and can be pre-ordered from desmondchild.com. Now, I've been uploading video clips from as many episodes of the podcast that I can over on the STV Podcast YouTube channel. I'm not going to lie, it's tough to get subscribers on there. I've yet to find the secret and crack the code. So if you could, I'd love it if you'd head on over there and subscribe. I've been doing some fun 80s pop culture polls on there too, so always great to have that interaction going. So that's all for this episode. It was a big one, but I'll be back next Friday. And until then, always be kind. Please rewind and unwind. And I'll speak to you all real soon.